Hello, 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 puppets. All right, let's get into this. More linear equations. Today we're looking at writing a function's equation given 2 points. So yesterday we learned how to find the slope of that equation from given 2 points. Now we're going to finish and write the whole equation, which means we need to get the y-intercept. That's the missing piece. So you learned how to subtract the values of your point yesterday, your 2 points. Today we'll need to find that y-intercept, and then you can write your equation from that. Random fact: when a grizzly bear and a polar bear mate, it's called a pizzy bear. Can you imagine being eaten by a pizzy bear? I can. Alright, so when we talk about the equation of the function, it's this guy right here, y equals mx plus b. We've seen that, we know that, and at this point we know m is our slope, b is our y-intercept. Those are the two things we find. Once we have those, we just plug them into our equation. We've got a graph here. This is going to be our reference today, this graphed line. So if we were to look at it right now, we can see that right there at 3, that's our y-intercept. So there's our b. And our slope would be counting down 2 over 1, which means our slope is 2 over 1, which is just 2. And so the equation, if we had the line, would be really easy to find. It would be 2x plus 3. Really simple. We're going to find that if we don't have that line to reference, okay? I missed something right here. I feel a little sheepish. I would have lost points on my quiz. What did I forget? I forgot it should have been a negative slope. So it's actually negative 2x plus 3. I bet some of you guys saw that and were shaking your heads at me. There it is right there. So this is the exact same graph, and we're going to start with the easiest method today, okay? Which entails watching what you're given. You have to be given a certain type of thing to make this method work. Okay, let's say we were given, we'll just pick those 2 points off the graph. So that first point has an x value of 0, because notice it didn't go left or right. There's no x value. It just went upwards for a value of 3. So that's 0, 3. The other point has an x value of 2, and then it went down to negative 1. So let's pretend we didn't have that graph, and all we had were these 2 points. Would we be able to figure out the equation of that graph just given those points? Well, we know to start with getting our slope. From yesterday, we can subtract our y values, okay? 3 minus negative 1. Notice we had to have a double negative there because we're subtracting a minus 1. And then we can subtract our x values on bottom. Remember, we write those arrows, top for y, bottom arrow for the x's, to help us remember where they go when we write slope. Okay, we got 3 minus a negative. We just cancel those out. 3 and 1 is 4. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. And we get a negative 2 slope. And I just realized, which I bet you guys did as well. All right, so we're back here. We've got our slope, our slope of negative 2. We're halfway home. We already saw that our slope's negative 2, now that I fixed my mistake. But what if we want to finish and write the equation, okay? The thing we don't have is the b. We know how to get m, but we don't know how to get b, okay? We're stuck. We can see it on the graph. If we had the graph, it's real easy. But what if you couldn't see the graph? What if the graph is gone? Now how do we figure out what b is? Okay. Well, this easiest method, if we look at what we're given, sometimes they give us the intercept right inside one of our points. Okay. We were given 0, 3 is one of our points. So let's think about that for a sec. What does 0, 3 tell you when the x is 0 and the y value is 3? What that tells us is if you were to graph that point, just like I talked about a minute ago, you're not going right or left for the x value. you're just going directly up. An x value of 0 means you stay right on the y-axis, and you put your point right there. In other words, if 0, that's a terrible 0, if 0 for x, the y is your y-intercept. Because we didn't move either direction on x, we stayed right on the center, the origin it's called, and just went straight up to y. This is also true in the reverse. If you guys were given a point like this, to graph that means we would go to -7, okay, out there to -7, but a 0 value for y means we don't go up or down at all. It stays right on the x-axis, which means given a 0 for y, -7 is the x-intercept, okay? So if you know what you're looking for, we can now see in any given point that that 0 tells me -7 is the x-intercept of whatever graph I'm dealing with. Given that I had a 0 for my x value, the y value I'm given is the y-intercept. It's staying on the y-axis. It is the intercept for whatever graph or function I'm using. So if you happen to be given a problem like this, where you have points, you need to write the equation, look and see, because they might have given you the intercept in the set of points right at the beginning, and so b is no longer missing. It's right there in front of you. We don't need to wonder what b is. It's just sitting there to be used. In this case, b equals 3, because it's right there. A 0 x value tells me the intercept is right next to it, and now I can write my equation. Y equals slope of -2 x. Don't forget that. Multiple people today lost points on the quiz when I was grading it, or yesterday for you guys, because they were forgetting their x. Don't forget your x. Let's pick a new color. Plus 3. There you go. That's the easiest first method. Y equals -2x plus 3. Yeah, let's jump to the second option. Can't always be that easy. If it was, what would be the lesson today? What if instead we were given this point and this point? So I was given 1, 1, and I was given 3, -3. And we didn't have a graph. Well, the first thing to notice is we should look and say, well, could I have an intercept here? Nope, no 0 in either of those, no 0 for that, so I don't have a y-intercept. And specifically, I'd be looking for a 0 at the x, because then the y value would be the intercept. Neither of my x's are 0, so I can't use the easy method. I have to find another way to get there. All right, the next way is probably something obvious you guys might think of yourself. There's no rule that says you can't just regraph the line. You've got 2 points. Regraph the line. If you've got some graph paper in front of you, it's that much even easier, right? If you're going to graph it, the important thing is you've got to graph a straight line, because if you graph a straight line or you don't quite evenly disperse all your hash marks for your numbers, your line is not going to line up, and you're going to get the wrong answer. All right, my first point is 1, 1. So remember x value first, then y value when you're counting a point. So right there. And then 3, -3. So again, x value first, and then down 3 to the y value. All right, now I'm just going to connect these guys. And if I'm not careful with how I draw, I see this kind of thing all the time. You know, a kid curves it a little that way, or maybe they curve it a little that way. It's really easy to have the wrong answer there. So a way to fix that, if you're going to use this method, use your slope count, all right? So I can look at it and say, well, it looks like it's going up 1, 2, 3, 4 for every 1, 2 that it's going over here, okay? And so I can kind of do the same thing again. 1, 2, 3, 4 to be over 1, 2, and that gives me more points to graph with, and that'll kind of help me see that this must be my intercept right here, okay? If you're just drawing a line, it can be really easy to be a little bit off and think that's your intercept, but it's not. So be careful, okay? And then once we do that, you're solved. You could count your slope off that line. You could count the slope from here, just like we've done before. Either way, you're going to get that slope that's down 2 over 1, right? So it's -2. And now we see that our b is at 3, because we read it off the graph. We just reproduced the graph. And you can write your equation. Y equals -2x plus 3. Okay? That method will always work as long as they give you points that are somewhere near the xy axis where you can count over to y. And most of the time they will. So if you want to use this, and if you have graph paper, this will probably be a pretty reliable method for you. All right. Why don't you pause and use practice? Use method 1 on this left problem. Well, I shouldn't tell you, but cat's out of the bag. You can use method 1 there. See which one you need to use on 2. Go. All right, if you're back, I'm going to start by getting my slope either way. I know I need to get a slope, so I'm going to subtract my values. Notice again the double negative. And then on the bottom, my x is -2 minus 0. My -4s, the negatives will cancel. Now I have 4 and 4 is 8. -2 minus 0 is still -2. So I've got a slope of, and 2 will go into 8 4 times, of -4. Now I'm going to look at my equation. Maybe I got lucky and they gave me the intercept. Not my equation, but my points. I'm going to look right up here and see. And I notice they did. They gave us an easy one this time with a 0 for x, which tells me the remaining y is my intercept. They gave us the intercept as a point. That was easy. And you might say, well, Mr. A, they're both -4. Yep, that's okay. It's just luck. That's what I made as my problem. Write it up. Y equals -4. Let's use the color to make it clear. -4 x, and then -4 is the intercept. There you go. Okay, second one, same thing. Find your slope. Actually, you could find your slope that way, but you might just find your slope this way. Okay, I'm just going to count -1 4, so I've got to go -1 4, and -2 -3. Right there. Now this one, as I look at it, again, I just made this one up off the top of my head, so I'm guessing I've got to be counting up here to find my intercept. This is a good example of how this method might be kind of tough. But it's going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then over 1, and just do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, over 1. Looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Looks like it's y equals, and it was 7 over 1 I counted, so 7x plus 11. I'm not even 100% sure that was correct, because when I have to draw a graph like this just randomly out of the blue and I don't have graph paper, it's not real clear to count, which is a good reason to learn another method. And what do you know? There is. Okay, this is called the algebra option. There's no graphing involved, and it's really the best one to know. Let's pick another set of points. We'll pick this guy right here, and we'll pick this set down here. So we've got -1, 5. And we've got 3, -3 again. And again, the point being, if we don't have a graph, can we find everything we need just from those points? Let's see. Step 1, you do what you always do. Calculate your slope. 5 minus -3. And then the x values on bottom, -1 minus 3. That pair of negatives cancel, so I've got 5 and 3, 8 on top, -1. Remember, plus -3, that's bad guy, -4. Let's simplify that guy, that's really just -2. So there's my slope. I've got a slope of -2. I'm halfway home. Now, let's fill in and see what we've got at this point. Y equals, and we know the slope, -2x. What we don't know yet is the b. If we knew the b, we'd be done. What we can do here is we can solve for b, because you guys already have solving skills. That is, if we didn't have all these variables, if we didn't have an x and a y and a b in the equation, there's just way too many variables to solve. We need to get down to only one variable, and then you guys can use your solving skills and solve it like a two-step. Gosh, if only we had some way to fill in that x and y. What is that, you say? We do. Right up here, we have two sets of x and y that they've already given us for that function. Well, that's brilliant. It's a good thought, guys. Both of the points they gave us, doesn't matter which one you pick, both of those are points off the graph. Remember, we just saw this line a minute ago. And both of those points are on that graph, on that part of that function. So I can use either of them and plug in for the x and the y that we're given. The only important thing to remember here is make sure you pull the x and the y off the same point. If I pull y out of one point and the x out of another point, that's an entirely different point than the original two. You can't mix and match. Okay, I'll just pick the first one. It doesn't matter. You got to pick one. I'll pick the first point. So its y value is 5. Its x value is -1. And by plugging those in, look what happened. Plugging in the x and the y, and then plugging the slope in, we now got rid of all the variables except one, and it's just a two-step equation. No, it's not even a two, it's a one-step equation. -2 times -1 is 2. 5 equals 2 plus b. Wow, that's ridiculously easy. Wouldn't even have to solve that. b equals 3. But if you needed to, you subtract off the 2. So that's just really kind of in the bag. Everything all in one. This third method will always work, and it's going to be the most direct, accurate method to use. Go back and just write your final equation. Y equals, and notice the y and the x need to go back to being y and x. You can't leave them plugged in. And then you just plug in your intercept that you just found. And again, that's the slope in the equation we've been seeing all night. Y equals -2x plus 3 for all of those examples. Now, what if you end up with something like this as you solve? You calculate your slope and you find a fractional slope, which we know happens most of the time. And then one of the points we have to plug in is 6, 0. And we're going to use that point to plug in. And somebody might say, well, hey, there's our intercept. But notice, it's the wrong intercept. the 0 is y, which means the x value is an x-intercept. And that's not actually helpful. We can't actually use that as a shortcut on this problem. It has to be reversed. So we would just have to plug in, like we always do now, or like the kind of reliable way to go is. So let's plug that in, and remember x, y. So we would plug in the 0 for y. We'd plug in the 6 for x, because we're trying to find this missing b. We don't have a b yet. And the point of this extra problem is just for you guys to note, you will often have a fractional value to work through in here, but we've been doing this lately. Remember, you've worked with fraction busters. We've been doing some work with fractions. So if you get here, don't get stuck and don't stumble. You can figure this out. Remember, the missing thing here is the plus b. That's what we're trying to figure out. So start by multiplying your whole number to the top. You already know how to do that. 6 times 2 is 12. Don't forget the negative. Negative 12 over 3 plus b. And we know that the negative 12 over 3 is going to become negative 4. So stick with it. Don't break down because you see a fraction. Most of the slopes will be fractions. You can still do what you need to do. Now, we found b, so we're done, right? No, don't stop here. If you stop here, you'll lose some points on the quiz. Don't forget to write your final equation. Okay, I've got my b. Don't forget that. And I found my m. We just kind of pretended that was found before we started the problem, but don't forget to plug that in. Okay, that is your final problem. It's got the slope and the intercept, and the x and the y are back in as variables. All right, there's a problem for you there. Why don't you give that a try? Notice on the left here, you've got a set of help steps. It walks you how to use this. Use method 3, and it just walks you right through each piece of it. Pause this and give it a shot. Go. All right, if you're back with me, let's see how you did. First, we want to get our slope. So I've got the 1 minus negative 4. Don't forget the double negative. I bet you're tired of hearing me say that. Negative 3 minus 2. Yep, Cheyenne is nodding her head. Okay, cancel that pair of negatives. We got 1 plus 4 is 5. Negative 3 minus 2, remember, that's addition, which makes negative 5. And so we've got negative 1 as our slope. Anything over itself is 1. And so we're halfway home. We've got a slope. So I found the slope. There's step 1. Step 2, write that equation. So y equals mx plus b. I've got my slope. It's negative 1. Cool. So wrote the equation and filled in my slope, and then also now pick a point to fill in x and y, step 3. So I'm going to pick either point. Now, depending on what you picked, I might not pick the same point. It's okay. We're still going to come up with the same b in a minute. Doesn't matter. All points on this line will give us the same intercept if we do the work right. I'll pick the first point here. You might have picked another one. That's okay. And again, with the whole number slope, I was really hoping to give you some more practice with fractional slopes, but just was not to be today, I guess. Not to be. That one was on accident. Negative times negative, those will cancel. We end up with positive 3. 1 equals 3 plus b. Subtract that 3 off. Negative 2 equals b. There we go. And we're about done. Last step, don't forget to write your equation. Slope, negative 1. Don't forget your x and y in there. And the b is negative 2. There we go. All right, here's your homework. Number 1 and 2, which method would you use? And then, of course, do it. Okay? Use your new methods, solve number 1 and 2. Number 3, Becky Sue Bob was learning this method, learning method number 3, the algebra method, and she worked through there, but she made 3 mistakes. You need to work through and find the 3 mistakes she made along the way and write those out. All right, peace out, guys.